Venerable Damcho and I just returned from an amazing trip to Brazil, and I'm going to keep this short and concise, I hope. It's very hard, even still in my mind, to articulate clearly all the magnificent things that happened on the trip. So I'm going to be working off a script so I can keep myself focused, because otherwise I'll be just going off in all directions, because there were so many beautiful things that happened. So we were invited to this first international conference on peace and education. And this conference took place in a very small city. The population is about 130,000 people, and it is close to the border of Argentina in Brazil. So how in the world did this happen? That is a very good question. So it happened, well, there's so many causes and conditions, but a number of years ago, Rui Mercado and his daughter, Maria Clara, started taking the SAFE online program that we offer here. And concurrently, while they were doing the SAFE program, Rui, the dad, was finishing up his PhD research thesis on contemplative practices, specifically focusing on compassion. And his daughter, Maria Clara, was and is still finishing up her master's degree on how to bring this kind of training to people who are training to be teachers in a university setting. So with that kind of orientation, these two are very familiar with what's going on in schools in Brazil. Sadly, like the rest of the world, there's a lot of violence in schools now. And they've had school shootings in Brazil. There's racism in schools, there's bullying. It's a very familiar topic if you've ever been in the classroom. Interestingly enough, I was shocked to see that in this country, there's now 32 states that allow teachers and staff to carry a firearm into the school. Now, that isn't all schools, of course. That is not in all the states, and is not certainly what teachers want. Being a former teacher, and there's other teachers in the room, you can imagine that this is not a response to violence in schools. And so this little tiny town of Uruguaina has taken the lead on trying to prepare teachers for the situation that they're encountering as they enter the classroom to teach. And they're also making this kind of training, this is the goal, for people who are already teachers. So this is a beautiful, essential thing. So they discovered somewhere along the way in the last couple of years that there was some grant money available. And so they got together, the Mercado family and the professor, actually the president of the University of Unipampa. That particular group, the Mercado family and the president, got together and put together an application for a grant to create this conference. And they were even surprised that they got this kind of funding that they did. So this allowed them to invite scholars from Brazil, Argentina, United States. They invited the Abbey. They were hoping that Venerable Children could come in person, but Venerable Children was on a teaching tour in Europe, so she pre-recorded a talk. They invited Jan Willis to the conference to address racism, specifically how to work with racism through nonviolent means, nonviolent resistance. They had students coming to this conference, high school students. So they canceled school for 2 days, and they brought the students to the auditorium. So there was this very vibrant feel in the auditorium of people who all really were invested in wanting to be there. I don't know about you, but there's some conferences I've been to in the past, and it's just like, but everyone who was there was very invested in, how to bring compassion into a school and not just make it theory, how to do this and teach people techniques on learning compassion and modeling it and teaching even students at the kindergarten level. So Venerable Damcho and I were also stunned to see that the mayor of the town of Uruguaina showed up at the initial day. Government people were there talking about how they're using nonviolent communication in the government and mediation techniques. There are a number of teachers making presentations. The criteria for every presenter at the conference was that you had to be a teacher, either a former teacher or, a current teacher, university or school teacher, because they wanted people who had a grounded sense of what it's like to be in the classroom. So at one point, the Mikado family reached out to Venerable Damcho and was asking, well, do you think we can get in touch with His Holiness? Do you think we can get in touch with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, to maybe give us a blessing for the conference? And Venerable Damcho directed them to write to his office. So amazingly, His Holiness wrote a beautiful letter. I'm going to read just part of it. It should be on the website, right, by now, the letter? Anyway, here's part of his letter in response to this conference. I am glad to learn that the Federal University of Pampa, Unipampa, in Brazil, is organizing 2 important international seminars on compassion and peace for teacher training undergraduate students and teachers. In particular, I'm encouraged to learn that you are bringing together school teachers, undergraduate students, professors, school principals, and the general public from the Americas to discuss how to introduce peace education, as well as cultivation of compassion in schools. Teaching young people about compassion is one of the most important things we can do for them and for the future of humanity. Real and meaningful change must begin within, in the heart. However, in modern education, there is no adequate attention paid to this important matter of educating the heart. Through bringing awareness and teaching skills to train and apply the mind, and through connecting with our shared humanity, children can appreciate the value of compassion and kindness. In fact, research studies demonstrate that compassion, caring for others, and connecting with others through shared humanity is the key even to one's own personal well-being. Being kind and compassionate also fits well with our human body, whereas anger, fear, distrust are harmful even to our physical health. So just as we learn the importance of physical hygiene for physical health, emotional hygiene is critical for our mental well-being. So it was also quite hilarious that in between every session at this conference, Venerable Damcho and I were sitting in the front row, students would roar up to the front and ask us for our photos, and the teachers, a number of other people. So it was a constant photo session. And, it was just the impact of the robes. It was nothing, it was so obvious. It was nothing personal. And this happened in between every session. And, Brazilian people are very warm. And so they would get in really close. It was just delightful to see the impact of the robes. And, just to think that, maybe a few years from now, they'll really get interested in Buddhist practices. So that was one thing. And then the Mikado family. So there's Hui, the dad, Maria Clara, the daughter, and the wife, Glaucia. They took us into their home. They fed us beautiful vegetarian Brazilian meals. We did listen to some Brazilian music, Venerable. We did confess that 2 weeks ago. They introduced us to our friends who came from another city to help for the conference and helped with the cooking and the organizing. So the entire experience was just this outflowing of warmth and enthusiasm for what we had to offer and what everyone else at the conference had to offer. So I think there's many more stories to share. Venerable Damcho will be sharing. I'll be doing another BBC in the future about this. But just to see how compassion is so critical at this time, and this little town is taking this up with the support of government people, the university. It just is amazing that it's happening in this very small place. So I feel very hopeful and just inspired by the energy of this community and what is going to happen after this. They were very aware that this tremendous response that they received at the conference was just step one. And we all have had the experience of going to a very inspiring conference and being enthused, and we're sort of feeling committed to whatever that conference is about. And then the conference is over, and then it's like, it's kind of dropped. Over time, it subsides, and there's no change. And that is not going to happen in Uruguaina, for sure, for sure. So yeah, we're still in the glow of this trip, we had many experiences that you'll hear about. But, just this attitude of the Brazilians where they meet you with a hug, that says a lot. And of course, they were very respectful. And the men in particular were really trying to do this. But, this is a very hard habit to break, to learn this. But they were really trying. So that's just a first little bit about our trip there. A beautiful experience with very beautiful people.